Okay, so that was a really grandiose introduction. So I hope I will live up to all that expectation. But look, to just put you at rest, have no expectations right now. Thank you first and foremost. I'm really, really delighted to be here. You know, and it's wonderful to be able to bring some of the knowledge I have from. I think one of the things I've had to do so many times is that there are two parts of me. So depending on where you meet me, I want to find out what information you need to know. So if you've known me from being a church girl, then I know what information I need to have with you. If you've known me from being a career development consultant, it influences, or if you've known me as an activist or a noisemaker on Twitter, you know, then I know what conversation I need to have with you. But, you know, today, am I on? Oops, okay. So today I want to talk about owning our space. But I'm going to bring a lot of what I know from the academic world, from the lived experience, really, you know, that lived experience. Because, you know, I was saying to one of the young lads I was speaking to at the back there is that when we read the good book says you're in the world. You're not of it, but you're in it. So we're in this world. So there are structures, there are systems that operate in the world, that operate in the system. So yes, on the one hand, it says that, you know, you are made in this wonderful image, likeness, you can do all things. But I live in a system that says that, you know, because of the color of your skin or your race, your ethnicity, your identity, you know, that this is where you belong. So how do we manage these two spaces? How do I own the space? Can I even own the space that is there? How do we work with people who are grappling? You know, so some of us we're not faced with those, but how do we work with people who are grappling with going through all of this? Thanks so much for the presentation before mine, you know, looking at people whose lives seem already almost predetermined, not in the way we read it from the good book, but in the conditioning, the unequal conditioning that life has provided. So whether they've been conditioned to come from a particular part of town, or from a parent who is strung out on cocaine, or from a parent who is so poor, you know, or from a group who 80–90% of them end up in jail, so that there is an unequal conditioning. Maybe they've been conditioned to come from a system where at a point in time for you to get education would have been a crime. So that unequal conditioning, so on the one hand, we look at it that it is about where you start, and on the other hand, we look at it that it's about where you finish. So today I'm going to be talking about, you know, coming out from the margins. And I'm talking to all of us that we come out from the margins because, you know, I'm constantly calling things out. But I'm saying that I need other people to call it out with me as well. That this is not a race I can run on my own. There's only 1 or 2% of us in the lived reality here in Ireland. That we need the majority population in Ireland. So we've heard stories about the United States. And sometimes and that's one of the major challenges we have in Ireland, that when we talk about the lived experience, we see it about something that happens in France or in Germany or in the United States, and that we don't see it here. And so we keep having arguments on whether it is real or not, you know. So it's about coming out from the margins. When we look at darkness, you know, that when the place is dark, that darkness in itself is not a thing. That when there is darkness, we cannot measure darkness. Correct me if I'm wrong. We might have a few scientists, you know, in the room, and you know that we could measure the speed of darkness, right? No. We measure the speed of what? Light. So we don't measure darkness, we measure light. And so that when we have darkness, it is the fact that there is the absence of light. That it is light that is absent. So we measure the speed of light. That it is light in itself that we do not have in a space. So that the only solution to darkness is that we can introduce light. So for me, light is information. Light is knowledge. Light is awareness. When you don't see, you don't know, you don't name. You cannot fix it when you don't know what the problem is. If we cannot go there, if we cannot talk about it, if we cannot see it, it's, like the game those little kids play, if I can't see, and if you have kids, when my kids were much younger, you could just hide and you see all their bodies right here, and they'll be like, I'm like, I can't see you. I'm totally seeing all of their, but you play the game with them and you act like, you really can't see them. But if I can't see you, if you can't see me, and thanks for that, presentation before, 7 more, because you're saying that when people are coming out of prison, you're saying, I see you, I get you, I know what you're going through, I know the disadvantage that you're experiencing. So it's all about light. If I told you my story, I wish my story, people meet me at this stage in my life and it's all neat, but the truth of my story is like this. It's a total mess. I can't even tell you, how I got here. And I could tell you, if I took my time, but it's a mess. It's a true mess. And that we're dealing constantly, with people, who it's a mess, And so I'm a realist. I like to say it like it is. So I hope I'm in a safe space where I can just call it like it is, right? Yeah. Okay. Because, I would not like to call this something implement. There's instead of calling it a spade, we say thank you, a gardening implement. That's English. It's a spade. So hopefully we'll try and call it what it is today. So when I was looking at, what we were going to talk about, how the realities of identities and inclusion intersect, all right, with the world of increasing fear and hatred. And I was like, where am I in this that we're trying to do? How are you located in this idea? Because I love pictures. I learn through pictures. I don't, I'm not much of a, I love words, but I love pictures. So every word I have, I form a picture of it. So I began to look at, so this is you and me, So how are we located there? So we're looking at identities, growing societal hatred. We're looking at who you're called to be. We're looking at inclusion. So how are all of those things connected? How are we related? How am I related, to all of those spaces? So that when we begin to look at, so for me, looking at it that my identity, I'm right here in the middle. And this is my identity and who I'm called to be. So there is the lived identity of what I have right now. And there is who I am called to be. And the question is, how do this intersect to who I am today? How does that intersect who I'm called to be and the reality of what I am living? You've called me this amazing person, but everyday life tells me you are no good. You can't do this. You can't amount to this. So what I wake up and I see every day is this. So it's looking at that. And today we have a lot of politicians, a lot of spaces. People are where they are today now because of who they hate, because of the group they hate. A lot of political spaces now are occupied by not the group you love, the group you hate. And the more hate you have for that group, the more followers you have. So we're forming associations and groupings based on who we're hating. And that's, the transition, But it's the same old song. What's that? Somebody sang, it's the same old song with a different meaning since you came out. But the thing is that it's actually the same old song. Because, prehistorically we hated different groups from the Jews, so we've hated groups. So it's always been, who we've hated and we've formed, groups around that. So I want to talk about race today. I want to bring race to the table. I want us to be comfortable talking about race. I want us to be comfortable understanding race, to understand the impact of race. Because we live in a world that is raced. You're working with people that are raced. We are raced, even when we don't talk about ourselves in terms of race. We're either benefactors or we're disadvantaged by race. But it is a reality that people live with, So the question I'm asking is that what has race got to do with it? Because we say that race is not real. So if race is not real, if it is socially constructed, and of dubious origin. We say it's dubious origin because scientifically it's been proven that the brain and the body and the head size does not impact on, so it's been kicked out. All those scientific understanding of race has been kicked out. So we're supposed to live in this post-racial era, a time of grace. This is a time of grace, greater grace. That's the time we're living in. So then what's it got? So why does racial thinking and racism still affect? We're living in a time of grace. It's called the better time. This is the time of better. And the thing is, it doesn't just affect people who are secular. It affects people who believe what you believe. It affects faith people as well. It's like gravity. And that's why I started by saying you're in it. You're not off it, but you're in it. We're in the world. So the laws, the controls, the things that happen in the world impacts on us. So that when we look at race, it's because race is and was meant to exclude others. So we're living in a system that is set up to exclude others. We're living in a system where your race is assigned without your consent. Nobody asked me, what race do you want to be? I want to be Caucasian. No. If I went around and said I'm Caucasian, they're like, no, Ebun, you need a psychologist, or you need casting out of devils or something. You know, they would probably pray for me. You know, if I went to an African church and I said I was Caucasian, don't just pray for me like she's got a devil in her. They'll think she's got mad, you know. So it's not, nobody asks you. It's ascribed. It's written on your body. You embody it. You carry it. So the amazing thing about it is that it comes at a cost. That's where race becomes problematic. That it is not value-free. We all missed, your wonderful talk yesterday. I missed your talk today. I was raging because I missed Lisa's talk. So I don't know if you gave us the foundation again of race and the value and how that changes across time and space. It is not value-free. I ask a question. Society is equal. By a show of hands, you think society is equal? You think society is unequal? By a show of hands. Fantastic. I love to always be in a room of like-minded people. So we know that society is unequal. The question is, what does inequality mean? Who is at the top and who is at the... That's what inequality is. We know that. Why we don't go is the impact, the lived reality of that inequality. How it impacts, how it changes people's identity. It changes who you're becoming. It changes it challenges the very foundations of the things you believe. Because inequality, you face it, you live with it, you live around it. Race creates boundaries. The boundaries bound. These boundaries is separate. It causes a line, it causes a demarcation. And this demarcation is it's not based on religion. We have some based on religion, but within that system, we have when race begins to bound, that it is the thing that is bound itself, but that the boundaries are there to exclude. It keeps some in, but every time we create a boundary, you have included and you have excluded. I started out by saying that the problem with darkness is not by eliminating darkness. So most times we're trying to fight exclusion. We're trying to get rid of exclusion. It's like trying to fight darkness, trying to drive out the darkness and make the darkness go away. It's not going to go away. Darkness only goes when we do what? Turn on the light. Exclusion can only go when we do what? Include. Inclusion is the only thing, and that is not something some people do, is what you and I do. You and I are inclusion. In our own little spaces, it's what you do, what I do. And that sometimes we separate our faith from the actions we take in the lived world, in the reality. This is our opportunity to demonstrate our faith. Every day we are provided with an opportunity to demonstrate the faith that we say we have. So race in itself ethnicities function in a similar way to race, but it is more malleable. You can, change your ethnicities, you can identify, but people will challenge you. It's like when I say I'm Irish, they're like, no, you're not really. You're not really Irish. Like, where are you originally from? Okay, where are your grandparents from? So in as much as it's, but they are both socially constructed and they have to be seen as real. So ethnicity is not real. Race is not real. It is socially constructed. However, we have to see them as real because that's where its power comes from. It creates a hierarchy in the lived world, and it can influence the process of human becoming. So when I look at race, that race creates what I call a racial stratification, a racial order. A race was there, created to maintain a racial order. So people will say we are unequal. It means some are at the top and some are at the bottom. And so racial stratification creates boxes. However, some people's boxes advantages them and some people's boxes disadvantages them. And so when our boxes advantages us, we don't see those who are disadvantaged by their boxes. And so a lot of my work focuses on those whose boxes disadvantage them. That they start from a point where, did I have it on my next slide? Good. So that when we look at racial stratification, it means that some people start at the top and some people start at the bottom. In my faith talk, in my work, I say it's not about where you start, but it's where you finish. It's not about all of that. You can do all things, So I preach all of that. I'm a good preacher. Meet me on a Sunday morning. I preach up a storm. And I preach from the good book, and I'm telling you, and it's formed me. And I think that's one thing, it disadvantages a lot of people who want to do what I do, or who want to have the resilience that I have, because my resilience comes from my faith, because it's just an invisible thing that keeps me going, because I believe that, so that even when I see, I'm like, if it's here, it means I'm more than it. If this challenge came, it means because I have what it takes to overcome it. So I keep going like an idiot. Honestly, because it's like you're seeing that there's no way through. But I'm like, no, it says, you will not be tempted beyond what you can endure. So if this thing came and I'm more than a conqueror, then it means that I can overcome it. So I just keep going because I have this stupid belief, that I'm going to overcome it. So that's where a lot of my resilience would come from my faith, And so when I have to teach in a secular space and I can't bring faith in there, so I always love it when I can be in a faith space and I can bring both the secular and the knowledge, and I'm like, okay, it's this combination that works, but hey, So what happens is racial stratification operates that some people start at the bottom and some people start at the top. So if you're like us, whatever us is, whatever your us is, so your us could be Christian, it could be white, it could be male, it could be female, it could be. So whatever us is, it could be gender, it could be race, it could be religion. So whatever your us is that some people start, if you're like us, we discriminate in favor of you. If you're almost like us, you start here. But if you're them, other, remember that race is created to separate, to cause, to exclude. And so when I exclude people, I put them here. They become ordered. And that's what we call the process of ordering. And people are ordered. So they have to keep looking at, today, God help you if you're the child of an asylum seeker. God help you if you're a refugee. You read about your parents in the paper and you want to, You just want to puke because you cannot believe the words. And we expect that people will feel okay. I'm saying, do we know that these words we have used to describe these people are human beings and they are reading it? So it's embarrassing, like, you know your daughter is looking at you that you're an asylum seeker. And they can read, so they can read all the things they've said about you, their mom. So the respect is gone. How do you nurture your children in that environment? And that's what I'm saying, that these are the lived realities, that we cannot live in this faith bubble and not go there, that people have this lived reality. So that when I did my research, it showed that when you come into the Irish labor market as a person of migrant descent, immediately there were two different experiences. Their experiences were dictated by being black or white. People who were black found that they had a downward movement. It meant they became immediately underpaid, undervalued. They had to go back to retrain. Their English, no matter how good it was not good enough. Their name. So they had a downward mobility. Even the whites, because they were Polish, Spanish, they were not British or white Irish, because of they were white, but they were like us, they were not us. So they found that, they had a lateral mobility. So first they plateaued, and then 2-3 years they were able to then have upward mobility. But that it changes, so they immediately, black and white, race impacted. And I'm giving you all this information, and I'm saying that all of this is happening in a space. Whether you're a woman or man of faith, they were in this space. This was their labor market experience. So how do you navigate? How do you manage all of these things? So that's the dilemma between who you are and who you are called to be. The experience, the dilemma between the experience and the expectation. So you go to church on Sunday and they tell you can do all things. Greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world, and blah. And then you go to work on Monday, you send out your CV and they say, sorry, we cannot employ you. So it's, you're in those two spaces. Both of them are a lived reality. So people find that, they are constantly having to stay in these stereotypical spaces. So whether you're a traveler in Ireland, or whether you're black in Ireland, or whether you're, whatever, group you're in Ireland, that there are these stereotypical spaces. And constantly life is trying to make you stay in your place. That's the challenge. I'm telling you my own real life story. 18 years I've lived in Ireland. And for these 18 years, Ireland has tried to make me stay in this place that it has created for me. But what I'm saying is what I love what Delgado says, is that there is a war between stories, they contend for and the tug that I have. So on one hand, I read the story of the amazing person that I am in him. Then I read again the story, I put out a post yesterday on Twitter. Like, if you go and read the post, like, I have, there have been some good comments, but there's been some trolls. I've taken snapshots of it. I said, no, there'll be decent people here this morning. I won't show you the snapshot of the insults that I got this morning. But you can read some of them, like idiot and it's a shame that your education did not, all of those things, So there's a constant, struggle. We contend for stories, that everything we do is about stories. The question is, what story are you listening to? And what story are you reproducing? Because every time we open our mouths, we're telling a story. Geography tells a story. History tells a story. The media is telling a story. What story are you telling in your office? So we are all telling stories. Oh, but they're asylum seekers. So it's okay for them to die at the sea. Because we've told a story. We've painted a story that they are illegals. So this story we've painted about them frees us of our conscience that human beings are actually dying at sea. Because we've painted a story and it helps us to go to sleep at night. So our consciences become seared and we feel nothing because they are no longer human. We're seeing them in this box we've created called illegals. So again, it's the stories we're telling in our offices in the same places. So before my last few minutes that I have on my talk here is, what shall we teach? What message can I bring from some of the things that I know? What should we teach? Number one is that experience reconstructs identities. We need to be very careful that the experiences that people have from being with us, around us, it reconstructs people's identities. The experiences they have in Ireland reconstructs their identities. So that when we begin to see homegrown terrorism or people who are doing well or not doing well, the question we begin to ask ourselves is, what is it about the environment? What are we cultivating in the environment? What is the church cultivating? What are you helping Ireland to cultivate? So that the experiences that people have impacts on their identities. So I didn't have time to go through it, but in my work, I showed 5 different kinds of experiences that people have in the labor market. And you could see that the experiences reconstructed their identities. Some who had the going round in circles experience, they became demotivated. It just changed who they were. Their drive, their energy, they had nothing. They became demotivated. So the first thing I'm saying is that experiences reconstructs identity. What is the next thing? Is that you are a determinant of outcome. Yes, I know I have talked about racial stratification. Racial stratification looks like it is deterministic. So that's the way it goes. However, we are. So I call that it's a hierarchy, a behavioral hierarchy in the labor markets. And that's the same thing in all our lives. That, there are systems. Racial stratification is there to keep you in this box. This is the box that we have prepared for you. This is where you fit. You should be big mama, taking care of other people's children and cleaning, and this is where we've prepared for you. That's the box we've prepared for you. But 3 types of behaviors that came out in my research were those who collude. They collude in that they agree with the system. The system says you can be nothing. You can't go beyond this. They collude, they agree, they stay there with the system. Oh, I can't do anything anymore. And not in a bad way, because sometimes, have you ever been flogged? There was a piece of scientific research then. And we know that, if you're punching somebody constantly, it's like the elephants. Those people who do the circus things with the elephant, they've done that research so many times that when you tie an elephant as a baby, you've kept them there for so long. Even when you take off the thing and allow it to go free, it doesn't go free. Why? It's been conditioned to respond and be in that way. And so the experiences that they have, people end up colluding with the system. Another response is that some people adapt. They're like, this is only what I can get. So you find that people of migrant descent, particularly Black Africans, would go into maybe taxi driving, care, cleaning. Why? Because that's what they can find. So they adapt to the system. So into healthcare, those kind of jobs, because that is the area of, I call it area of least resistance. Then some people resist. So those who resist, they don't resist in fighting. They resist in believing something, in pushing beyond the boundaries. It's just that it takes its toll on you. Because it means you have to be extra, you have to work extra hard, you have to be extra better to be able to attain all of that. So there is a behavioral hierarchy. Those who collude are at the bottom, those who adapt are in the middle, and those who resist the stratification order are able to rise above those spaces. What is the third thing? That we teach an attitude to difference. Our attitude to difference is tolerance, acceptance, or recognition. My take is that, did anybody leave home this morning and you were thinking, you know what, I'm just going to go out looking for somebody to tolerate me? Anybody here? Absolutely none. But the church teaches tolerance, isn't it? We teach tolerance. Yes, you can tolerate things. You cannot tolerate people. So what my work talks about, and I don't have the time to do it, but I talk about acceptance, that we begin to teach. And the good book tells us that. Because I thought it was my research. I was like, no, but you're just copying from the Bible. You're just copying right. Because that's what it talks about, 70 times 7. Where's the lady who spoke before me? 7 more, that's it, you know? Acceptance. I'm not saying you're perfect. I'm saying this is a, representation of, I accept you as who you are. This is who you are. This is what I accept this as a true representation of you. So that's what we're saying, that we begin to accept people. We need to begin to teach. If we start teaching our young ones from today, acceptance of difference, in 20 years, our world will be changed. But you know what we want to do? We're in the dark. We want to drive out the dark. You cannot drive out the dark. We need lights. We're trying to drive out, it's madness, trying to drive out the dark, trying to drive out discrimination. No, we just need people to be more accepting of difference. When we are accepting of difference, that negative judgment that we impute on people and things will reduce. It's the negative judgment that we do that impacts on where people are. I'm going to just fly to that because that's the definitions and all. That's the definition I came up with of social acceptance. The state or act of receiving someone during unharmful social interactions as true and valid without imputing judgment. Remember, judgment is not yours. It's back to the word. It's not yours to judge, good or bad, superior or not superior. It's not race becomes a problem when we say better. The minute we say one is better, once you use that word better, then race becomes a problem. It's the introduction of betterness and superiority that makes the notion of race problematic. So it's not imputing judgment. Number 4 thing is that race consciousness is a requirement in everyday life. You cannot be ignorant of race. It doesn't impact me, it doesn't appear to impact me, that's only because it advantages you. If you are not impacted by race, it is because you are advantaged by race. Remember, we all agreed that society is unequal. If it is unequal, it means that some are at the top, some are at the bottom. Those are at the top are advantaged by their race. What is race consciousness? 4 key things. You need to understand the changing meaning of race, that it changes across time and space, country, across people. 100 years ago to now, race has changed. Second thing is a hierarchy, racial stratification. Some people are at the bottom, some are at the top. You need to be aware when you're working with people in your church, in your spaces, you need to be aware that this person is coming from a place, they are functioning in a system that has stratified them at the bottom, while some people are at the top. Third thing is how we manage racial difference and then building inclusive spaces through social acceptance. I don't think we have the time to play this. Do we have it? Can we play this one? Yeah? I think it's just a 2-minute video. But it's just to show, because I talk about that social, that it impacts on our identities. So this is an experiment done with 2 monkeys who were treated unequally. So just want to see in action the impact of inequality. You can play.
So a final experiment that I want to mention to you is our fairness study. And so this became a very famous study, and there's now many more, because after we did this about 10 years ago, it became very well known. And we did that originally with capuchin monkeys, and I'm going to show you the first experiment that we did. It has now been done with dogs, and with birds, and with chimpanzees, but with Sarah Brosnan we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put 2 capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group. They know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the 2 monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine for them. Now, if you give the partner grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes, it's a far better food, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently, we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber, and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests a rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again. So this is basically the Wall Street protest that you see here.
So thank you so much. So again, so what we see there is just inequality in action. That what I'm saying is that it changes people's identities. From a calm monkey became aggressive. When you're at the bottom of the ladder, you keep looking up. You see how everybody ahead of you, you graduated together, you're working hard, but you see them, ahead of you. Can we go to back to the slide? I think I just have one last slide. So again, so you see people who've gone ahead of you and you see inequality, in action. Sorry. Can I get back to my slide? Thank you. So finally, what I'm saying is that the challenges faced today is not a function of low self-esteem or even lack of faith, okay? Or even a belonging need. It is a problem steeped in a racially stratified society. We can all play a part to change it. The wholes becoming more accepting, the minorities becoming more persevering, the structures unseated. You and I making a change. When we focus on difference, we judge because we treat difference as hierarchical. Sameness unifies, it bonds. When we talk of inclusion, it is a person. It is you, it is me, it is us. We are inclusion. We make a policy, society, systems inclusive by the things we do. Thank you.